there has been some case law and certainly cases gone to court or that have been considered through the courts where something within the same use class, for example, might have started off with 3 employees and became 103 employees. Clearly there's a heck of an intensification by a factor of 30 or whatever it is. In terms of that information, which was in the context of the clarification which was trying to deal with the issue of material change of use, which was raised during the processing of this application, in terms of the context of the law that you've had in the opinion today, an increase of, well, in that case it would have been 22 staff, would not suggest that there was an intensification that was sufficient to constitute a material change of use. That's not to say there's not an increase, but it wouldn't be material.
I'll come back to Councillor Mason. Oh, sorry, Councillor Good.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry. And forgive me because I probably haven't spent as long on this as I should have done, but I did wonder if it had been considered whether we could put a schedule together so that the site can be regularly monitored for noise. So rather than waiting for a noise situation to arise, can we not schedule for example, a visit every couple of months to check the noise output at this site, and that would give maybe the residents some comfort and some assurance that we were keeping up to date with what noise was being generated. Thank you.
I think in principle I can understand where you're coming from there. It's a question of who's doing the noise monitoring and you know, whether we believe it or not. I think in the context of the resources in-house to do regular noise monitoring at the times that it would need to be done, we just haven't got the capacity to do that. That would suggest that would be, then we try and pass that on in the way of a planning condition to somebody else to do it. But I think we're probably drifting beyond planning into the noise nuisance territory, which is always reactive. And in that sense, obviously we had a complaint that was last, I think, October, November time, which was resolved through to February, March this year and dealt with. I remember signing the abatement notice, so it was fairly serious stuff, but not under planning legislation, it was noise nuisance. And as far as EHOs were concerned, that then was a settled complaint. But as members will be aware from the site visit, we now have another complaint relating to another noise source on the site, and that's currently going through that process through the Environmental Protection Act. So that's how that's ordinarily dealt with by the council.
I'm going to ask my questions and I'll come back to Councillor Mason and Councillor Thackeray. Any reference to the KVA planning consultancy report? Now, I would have thought the council would want to have gone through that and to have analysed it and to have, if you like, taken it to pieces. And I'm just wondering if you could have any comment as to why there is absolutely, as far as I can see, you actually could correct me, why there is no reference to that report. It's a long report and it's obviously somebody's taken a lot of time and trouble to prepare it.
Councillor Andrews, yeah, council has been provided with all the documentation that has come into the council. Council has had very little time in which to provide his opinion, and so what he's attempted to do is to provide a summary or a high-level opinion. Now, if we wanted a more detailed opinion to look at these documents and comment on them, his advice and his opinion would not have been available for tonight's hearing. So we thought it important for members of the planning committee to have an opinion, albeit not a detailed opinion, before them tonight to be able to make a decision, rather than delay matters or wait for a more detailed opinion. But council has confirmed that the summary and conclusion of his opinion will still be the same, even if he's to provide a detailed opinion.
So my second question is to the planning office, and that is, we had this rather detailed report, which, as I say, somebody has spent a lot of time probably paying for and writing out and preparing. Have the planning office had an opportunity to go through that and to prepare some written comments on it?
Chairman, the planning officers have spent months dealing with this case, and in the context of this, clearly all of the information that we've had come in relating to either the planning issues or the noise issues, we've considered and have put them past our own in-house experts, our environmental health officers, but also included that in the significant package of information that was then sent to council for council to give an opinion on. And we simply could not have got a detailed blow-by-blow account back to you tonight in relation to an extensive letter like that from council in time, other than to give you a high-level response, which is what you've got today. We've given you the entire council's opinion, Chairman. We haven't summarised it. You've got exactly what council has had, but I can confirm council has had that too and has read it all and come back with these comments.
My third question is to Glenn, and that concerns the barrister you've gone through, who I understand is provincial chambers. Now, my understanding is that the people who are the real experts on a complicated issue like this are the people who actually sort of sit down and have dinner with the judges, if you like, who are London Council. And I'm just wondering why it is that we haven't gone to London Council and why we've gone to the provincial chambers, which the council regularly uses.
Yes, Chairman. King's Chambers in Leeds are renowned as a planning law specialist set of chambers. Now, it's our view that this case does not merit instructing London Council at exorbitant fees. It's relatively a straightforward planning case, not, for example, a major development within the town or whatever. And so we just couldn't justify that cost. In any event, I don't think it's true to say that you will always use London Council because they're close to the judges. Otherwise, all the provincial chambers would end up going out of business effectively. So no, we discussed the choice of counsel between us, and we all agreed that counsel from King's Chambers would be adequate on this case.
Chairman, I really feel as though I need to comment at this point. I've dealt with council in 37 years of doing planning, and in my opinion, very often the provincial barristers, as you call them, are closer and nearer to the ball than somebody remote in London. But in terms of my time at Ryedale, which is approaching 20 years now, I've had occasion to use King's Chambers on many occasions, and that's because of their expertise in planning and environmental law, not just planning and law. I certainly wouldn't want to face them on the other side of a witness box, because they know their onions and they know what they're doing.
And my final question, again to Glenn, is what was the question that council was asked? Was he asked, is the officer's report sound, or was he asked, is it possible in the circumstances of this case to argue that there is an intensification of use?
Yes, Chair, both those questions. The officer's report was forwarded to Council and he has read through that. He was also asked to advise on the intensification issue. So yes, on those two items, he has considered them and advised accordingly.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Mason.
I suppose it follows on two questions. Is that okay to have two questions? One question is, it follows on for this one, is I picked up in the opinion that there's not a perfect overlap of historical permissions that relate to this land, which then leads me to question on the decision actually made, and is this the time for us to actually put this right and close these loopholes? Because I think there's obviously some problems here with historical planning. The point about it being not a major development, well, it already is a major development in a village with not a perfect overlap of historical planning permissions. So that's one question is I think I would like to have a second opinion based on what Glenn has said as a local member, but I'm not going to propose that just yet. My other question is, can we not ask BATA whether they would enter a Section 106 agreement keeping the noise levels at 42 decibels in unsociable hours? And if it's an agreement between both them and the council, it gives us the security as a council to be able to enforce those levels. Can we ask that question of them and ask it in a reasonable way to give them the opportunity to work with residents to get it right?
Chairman, you can ask the question. You can you're the planning committee. You can tell me to ask them whatever questions you want. I've got a fairly good idea what the answer will be, but you as a planning committee can make whatever decision you want.
Well, then in that case, then can I ask the chair, can we ask that question?
Can you let me finish, please? In doing that, you would defer the decision tonight, so I or Neve can ask them whatever list of questions you want before you then are in a position, in your view as a committee, to make a decision. Whether you're still in charge of making that decision by next month is a matter of debate. I don't know the answer to that question, but we've been dealing with this application for months now. You've got a duty to make a decision on a planning application in 8 weeks.
Based on some information that we've
well,
had.
Based on,
hang on, Gary, please. Let me come back to you now.
You didn't let me finish.
I thought you had to, Gary.
So the situation here is, as a planning committee, we have a duty to make decisions, whichever what decision is. Normally we would make a decision to either approve or refuse. If your decision is effectively no decision, because you want more information, then I can go back to whoever it is and ask for more information.
That's not what I asked.
What I can't guarantee you is, if we do that, we'll still be having that decision to make.
So, but the answer to the question was, yes, we can ask, or can we, the other question is, can we impose a Section 106 agreement on this? Right, so can we ask the question of BATA whether they're willing to work with residents on that?
The decision of this planning committee that
Okay,
you want to phrase some questions or some subject areas that you want us to go back yet again to BATA to ask and say, will you do this, that or the other, then we can do that.
Okay.
We can go start that process. What I can't guarantee you is that we'll finish that process.
Well, I'm pretty sure, I'm making an assumption that BATA would like to work with the residents of the local village they're based in, surely. It might be a question we need to ask them.
BATA are working with our environmental health officers and villagers, as I understand it, to deal with a current noise nuisance complaint. That's separate from this planning application.
Well, did I hear right, though, that one of the residents has said that they haven't actually responded to their emails? I'm sure that was somewhere I've had feedback on. So my question was, can we ask them to voluntarily go into an agreement on the site on the noise levels for a mother, and we can. So let's
I think this committee would need to be very clear what it's asking. It wants questions, the questions asking that it wants answers to. And I think it needs to be very clear what it wants those controls to be, or, be it noise or hours or whatever it is that we heard about tonight, and how the members feel that that might be delivered if the applicants were willing to enter into that sort of level of control. And the only two ways you can apply those levels of control are either by way of planning conditions or legal agreement. And there are certain things that conditions can't do. So I suspect if you were moving into going beyond something which is currently lawful, which doesn't have conditional controls on it, then you're probably looking at a legal agreement.
Mr. Thackeray.
There's been a lot said since a little question came into my mind. My gut instinct tells me that BATA will want to work with the people of Motherby, and the people of Motherby will want to work with BATA. It's obviously a very long-established local business. Everybody's interest that it thrives, but equally it's in everybody's interest that it thrives in such a way that it doesn't destroy other people's lives through its activities, be that lawful, unlawful, increased activity, decreased activity, whatever it may be. I think it's clearly a lot of things are getting piled into this planning application, which probably don't belong here, but it is nevertheless bringing old issues out of the woodwork, bringing new issues to the table that probably wouldn't have been dealt with, and I think this is our opportunity. And just to repeat, I think that the people in charge of BATA will want to work alongside us, and therefore, whilst I accept Gary's views that they may wish to take action that takes it away from our control, I would like to give BATA and all of us the opportunity to ask those extra questions. There aren't that many, and to invite BATA to acknowledge and accept some limitations, if I use that word, just because I believe that the noise is a big issue if it is not directly related to this planning application. Therefore, I concur with Councillor Mason that we put sensible questions to BATA.
No, we're not in debate.
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
in questions. So what is your question? Okay. Councillor Cleary, did you have a question?
Well, my original question was going to be, are we in debate or still in questions? And I think I'll wait for debate.
I think that's debatable.
I think the question, actually the big question on the whole subject
So are you...
It's a question. I'm asking a question. The question is, and it is the big question of the whole problem. What we're talking about here is, the big problem is not a planning matter, it's environmental health. What we're being asked to look at is a planning application for the bins. The noise issue is an environmental health problem and is, I gather, being dealt with by the EHO. Am I right in that summing up to either yourself or to Gary?
That's our take on it, Chairman. I think it comes down to what's reasonable to deal with when you're dealing with this application for however many bins we're dealing with. There are other controls and other mechanisms that the council has open to it, and there is an open live investigation going on. So in a nutshell, you've probably distilled it all down, Councillor Cleary.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm listening to the debate and I take on board all the issues about noise, etc. My concern, and I need to ask the Chief Planning Officer the question, is if we do not determine this application tonight, how likely is it to be referred to PINS because of non-determination?
Chairman, I can't really answer that question to you. There is clearly a situation where any application that's 8 weeks and 1 day or 13 weeks and 1 day, depending on the type of the application, that we run the risk of somebody saying, right, I'm taking the decision away from you. I think it's fair to say that you can see from the date of the application that clearly there's been a lot of toing and froing on this application to try and get to a point where the applicant is able, I think, they think they're able to get a decision locally with the local planning authority. But clearly this was deferred at the last meeting to enable the site visit to be carried out so members could see the situation on the ground, and also went into the neighbouring property to view it on the ground there too. To come back, I think the applicants are anticipating a decision tonight. So I can't speak with any confidence that you know, if we didn't make a decision tonight, that wouldn't be taken away from us, but I'm not certain. I'm not certain.
I hope there's no more questions. Okay. Just
Yeah.
one question,
One
Councillor
question.
Thackeray.
My question is to the planning officers. Can we please be told what the proposed increase in production is at BATA in order for us to have a clue on what the traffic movements are going to be for the next 3 years? Thank you.
Chairman, we've already said we can't project into the future as to what that is here tonight.
No, I realise that.
Yeah.
You're asking for this information to be supplied if the application is deferred. Right. Can we move into debate then, please? I think it's Councillor Mason's ward, so do you want to start, Councillor Mason?
Thank you, Chair. I've been writing notes and my speech has gone completely to pot because some of the points have been raised and answered in questions, but I shall proceed. First, I'd like to thank the officers because I know there's some hard work gone into this, and I do know that there's been a lot of toing and froing from residents and myself to some point as well. I'll be honest, I am still concerned about this application and the impact it has to the village of the Motherby. The residents and the parish council have put lots of information and time into this, as you can see from the KVA report and tonight with the representations. I do feel the cumulative impact of this application for the bins must be considered, as I feel it's directly linked to this increased production of the site that we don't have any idea about. The two are clearly linked, and you know, they got to me there. On a personal note, I've already said getting the opinion so late hasn't particularly helped. I'm trying to digest it as we speak. And also, Glenn, it's a major development for people in the Motherby. I think it needs to be treated like that because it is the biggest thing in the village, and it does impact village life twice a day at school runs as well as 24/7 now of noise. I've already mentioned the opinion states there's no perfect overlap in historical permissions. Whatever that means, obviously there's clearly gaps. No. You can come back in a minute, can I? Otherwise you'll just throw me off. There just seems to be too many loopholes, and we should close them if we can. I'm still considering carefully whether I'd like to have a second opinion from, is it London Chambers that was recommended? Well, as recommended by the chair, and you know, I'd like to see if chair would actually be in consultation with that. But the opinion does back the officers based on information provided by BATA. We've got to the point of some of the questions that were asked. But before I ask that second opinion, I think I'd like to add, from the conversations I've had with residents locally, they do not want to stop this company from working. This is the point. And so they want the company to be respectful with their neighbours and operate under recognised parameters to protect the amenity of householders in the local area. The impact of the noise on this site must be, in my opinion, treated as a holistic way. The production is causing unacceptable levels of noise in the night. The bins are there to help production. They must be considered together. The World Health Organization guidelines have pointed out that, and as pointed out by KVA, clearly state the impacts, as well as the council, we need to aspire to those levels as well. So we need to make sure we are backing up what World Health Organization is saying, and it is impacting the noise. The amenity of local residents. My notes have gone all mixed up here now. I believe the KVA have reserved the right to reply to legal opinion via the Motherby Parish Council. Is that correct in the KVA's opinion? I think so. I read somewhere that the Motherby Parish Council reserved the right to reply, but I'm not sure whether that is correct because the opinion came so late. Could we check that for me? And the Section 106, I think I'd like to move a motion to ask BATA whether they would enter Section 106 on the noise level to keep the decibels down to that level. That would be my first motion.
Is that a motion to
It is.
defer the application pending the questions to be asked to the applicants?
I think we have a duty to ask the applicants because, as far as I'm concerned, and I know right at the beginning of this, just before COVID came, we were about to set up a community liaison group with BATA and the local residents, and that went completely to pot because of COVID. Now, the negotiations were there and then happening, and I think we would have reached that point with that community liaison group negotiation. But what we've got to now is basically a COVID pandemic has got in the way of an application, and I do believe that BATA want to work with the residents, and I think that opportunity should be given to them. So I think a Section 106 agreement, giving us the enforcement capability of 42 decibels in unreasonable, unsociable hours, is a good one. Let's at least ask the question, as far as I'm concerned, and at the same time, we can get the production figures for future.
Chairman, I think we're probably getting beyond. I'm trying to distill it down. I'm trying to be helpful, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm trying to avoid a situation, though, Gary, where every time somebody speaks, we, you, me, or everybody, or other people immediately come back again. I'd rather like to hear what everybody has to say before you speak at the end, if that's okay.
I think can I finish? I mean, I think as a committee we do have, we need to have balance in our decisions. So we need to balance the company with the residents. And the residents here have an opinion. And the residents here are being impacted, as we've seen now from the doctor's letter. And its noise is the main problem. So I do think we need to put some sort of enforcement on the whole site. And I'm pretty sure BATA will want to work with the residents on that. And then they can operate freely without any problems. Because otherwise they're going to have complaint after complaint after complaint after complaint coming after them. And that's what's going to happen.
Sorry, Chairman. I need to take issue because actually I think it's important that the committee hears what the Chief Planning Officer has to say. He is our professional officer. Yeah. And if we can't hear what the professional officer has to say when something is raised, then it leaves us in a very difficult position to be able to make the right decision.
Yeah. Members, what I'm trying to avoid is a situation where we have members speaking and then after every member who speaks, we have a response. I mean, if members wish to carry on as we used to, that's fine. But I would rather we hear the members. I'm not trying to stop the planning officers from speaking. The planning officers will speak. They have their chance to speak. I think they should have their chance to come back at the end. But it's up to you, members. If you think I'm doing the wrong thing, please say, and we'll revert back to the previous practice.
We've already asked the question, can we ask for a Section 106 to be inputted? And we had the answer was yes, we can. So my motion is, can we ask them to see if they would agree to a Section 106 agreement to keep the decibels of the site down to 42 decibels as set out by World Health Organization?
So your motion is that to defer the application while that request is put to the company.
Yeah, what he said.
By the officers.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's not going to change anything if they come back or we approve it tonight without that condition. So it doesn't make it a blind bit of difference.
Yeah.
Apart from goodwill needs to come into this.
Right. Councillor Thackeray.
Beg your pardon. Can go back through that again, but I think there are additional questions to the ones that Councillor Masons has put, and if we could just make it open to the extent that we wish to submit further questions to BATA and enter into discussion. Is that okay?
If that happens, we need a motion, and we need a way of those questions being given to the planning officer, and for the planning officer to know when those questions have finished being given. So I mean, I think we'd have to say that the questions would have to be set out within 24 hours.
Chairman, I was just...
I have
going to
two
suggest-
questions and I've already put them in.
Yeah.
It's production levels and the noise.
Chairman, I was just going to suggest, just out of helpfulness, that if the decision of members tonight is to defer the application, okay, that's the movement, and then to suggest that we enter into a conversation, a discussion with BATA to cover the areas that have been discussed tonight without making reference specifically to a Section 106 agreement or a condition or anything, because that might come out of the discussion. It might not, but it might. And so it would help, I think, officers if we haven't got, I'll say, the straitjacket of a resolution that says we want a legal agreement, when actually we might not need a legal agreement. But that was really the suggestion I was going to make, was that essentially if the mood music of the meeting is members wish to defer the application, that's the decision, and defer it to go back to further negotiation, discussion, questions with the applicants to cover the following areas.
Creative discussions, positive discussions, hopefully.
Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been a proposal, I don't know if it's been seconded yet, if I might speak to the proposal, that I think we are in danger of losing sight of what we're here to discuss. And if we lose sight of that, the applicant, in order to continue their business plans, will go to appeal. And we will lose the chance to, we'll lose the decision. BATA, we've already heard from both Councillors Mason and Thackeray, they believe them to be forward-thinking, communicative, helpful people. That's out with our decision. So hopefully they will do that anyway, but that is not what we're here to decide. We're here to look at the planning planning application as it stands.
Mr. Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Well, I think we can all agree that this is a successful local company. They're providing employment, produce for the agricultural community, and they clearly need to be encouraged and supported to grow in order to meet any increase in demand that they've got. However, it's spent many decades growing within the Amotherby community and must only continue to do so within existing regulation and with due regard to the reasonable needs of that community. And it can't be denied that in recent years, intensification and night working has increased considerably to the detriment of neighbouring people, and with particular regard to breaches of WHO noise guidelines, or so it would appear. I haven't really had sufficient information on those to make myself sure. And now, I believe our task as a committee is to reach a fair balance between the wants and needs of the plan applicants and the unacceptable impacts those plans may or will have on neighbours by means of reasonable conditions or, in the extreme, refusal. And while I can see that this application in isolation might be considered acceptable, it potentially doubles the capacity of the site's output just through the size of those bins. And that can only occur through intensification and extended hours of working. So consequently, unless or until I can be convinced that BATA are able and willing to operate within current noise limitations, legal limitations as far as I'm concerned, I'm really unable to support any increased capacity. And I would certainly like to see that sort of negotiation between the company and the local community to the satisfaction of everybody. And if that risks them saying, no, we're going to call it in, that is not working with the community. Thanks, Chair.
I think Councillor Mason has spoken already. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Well, in that case, I will say... Councillor Windrus.
Thank you, Chair. I hear what everybody's saying. I think it'd be wonderful for BAT and the residents to work together. But I also think we have to make some kind of decision tonight on what's in front of us. One way or another, we must make a decision on what's here. We can ask the environmental health to monitor constantly at the site, and if there's any breaches, then they must act immediately to protect the immunity of their residents of a mother bee. But we certainly need to have this decision made. Otherwise, if they go to appeal, they get it, they can do whatever anyway. You know, so I think we should make a decision tonight. Thank you.
Right, I will add my two penny worth. First of all, I mean, we're not here just to make planning decisions. We're here to represent the community, and that means doing our best for the community within the council's policies and within the law. Those we can never go against. But we must always think about how we can help the community and our local businesses, of course, of which BAT are one. The environmental health legislation deals with public nuisances. They are statutory nuisances. They are statutorily defined. What we're talking about, it goes beyond public health. It concerns the amenities of the residents. This is, in my view, a separate issue. It may involve the environmental health officers making judgments, and it may involve them being involved in decision making, but it is not applying the same principles as is applying when you are deciding whether or not there is a statutory nuisance. I'm not happy with the council's opinion for two reasons. First of all, I think it should have come from London Council, and secondly, I'm not happy about the fact that the KVA report hasn't even been given a mention. And I appreciate that there are difficulties in that, and I appreciate there was there are tight timescales, but nevertheless, I don't want to rush this decision. I would, if nobody else has seconded Councillor Mason's proposal, I will second it from the chair. I think Councillor Thackeray did actually second it, but I wasn't sure about that. And I think we ought to go further than that and say that involved in these meetings with the developers, perhaps if the parish council wish, the parish council's planning consultant could also be included in that consultation. So that perhaps, because I firmly believe that that community has lived so long with Batter, and Batter have lived so long with that community. I firmly believe that if you put them two together, we could sort something out that would help the community and stand the community in good stead for the future. That's my opinion. Now, is there anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Goodrick. Sorry, all right, Councillor Mason.
I was actually going to amend the motions to Simon's suggestions and with Gary's suggestions actually to enter in negotiation to make sure we can come to this. So roll back a bit from the section 106 and actually enter the negotiations to find that agreement between the residents, the council and BATA to give them the opportunity to work with the residents. That I think is crucial. Now, Gary's suggestion of rolling back from that, the handcuffs, the shackles, I think you called them, I'm not sure which it was, of that is a good idea. So I think maybe we should suggest that. I'd have to take some advice on whether the planning consultant will be involved, but I don't know if that's possible.
No, I don't think we can do that, Chairman. I mean, they're essentially representing a third party, albeit the parish council. We're here as the local planning authority, as the independent arbiter on that to do the negotiation with the applicant. And the outcome of that, clearly we would then consult with the parish council, whatever it may be, and their representative, but we can't have them involved in the negotiation.
But you would take into account their information
Well,
that
yeah,
they've submitted?
yeah,
Of
of
course.
course. That's all on public record. But
So-
I mean, I
so-
think, dependent on, who knows where this might lead, but if we ended up with a response from an applicant that then required us to then go back to third parties, including the parish council, their representative or whoever, before coming back to you, that's how it works. It wouldn't involve a tripartite or I can't remember what four-partite is of a
Quad.
negotiation to move this forward. So we need to capture what the view of the local planning authority is here tonight to go if there's a decision to defer and remove the straitjacket of the section 106, which I think was the word I used, because obviously we don't want something that's too prescriptive, to then give a broader scope for that discussion to capture the things that have been raised tonight.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't take it off the table, but I just really am conscious that we need to get BATA to at least offer them the opportunity to meet the World Health Organization on the site. So that would be my motion, would be to defer with the questions asked, and one of them being whether they would accept that agreement and provide us the pre-production figures and other questions that will be submitted within the deadline, a short deadline. 24 hours? Yeah, 24 hours, 36 hours.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really sorry. I find this application and the way the meeting is going deeply uncomfortable. We are here as a planning authority to make planning decisions. We are straying into environmental protection work here, and we are losing sight of what we should be doing and how we should be conducting ourselves. And I understand everybody's concerns about noise. Nobody knows how hard it is to do noise mitigation and how disturbing it can be. I do. I've had it in a professional capacity and in a personal capacity. So I understand exactly where the village is coming from, but we are a planning authority. We're not an environmental health body other than as a separate issue, and we are straying outside our given task here, and we are, at the end of the day, quasi-judicial, and we're here to make decisions.
We've got one motion on the table. Should we vote on it and then decide
well,
from
well,
there?
before we vote, the planning officer has got to come back. You have to have an opportunity to come back, Gary. So do you wish to say anything?
No, Chairman, I tried to be helpful to try and encapsulate what I think Councillor Mason's suggestion was, which is essentially a further request to defer the planning application, to go back to the applicant to ask a series of questions to see what that response might be. And I can't predict what that will be based on, we don't know what we don't know at the moment. That may not be met with enthusiasm. I just don't know. The risk, as we've heard and other members have raised, is that essentially we're here to make a planning decision, and we may not get far with that, but I don't know the answer. My crystal ball's no better than anybody else's sat in here tonight. So we can, if that's the view of the meeting, if that's the decision of the meeting, we as officers will go and do that for you, but I can't guarantee what the outcome will be.
In that case, can I go to the vote? So the motion is that the application be deferred, pending officers going back to the applicant with questions, including questions which are to be given by members to the officers within the next 24 hours. Is that what your motion was, Councillor Mason?
Yeah, more or less.
Right, so I've seconded that from the chair, and unless Councillor Vakri seconded it, I don't know if you did or not.
You've already seconded it, but I will second it again.
I think for the purpose of the minute, if we just call this deferred for further officer negotiations with the applicant, and then capture what those negotiations are out with this meeting, then there's a clear minute for the purposes of the minute. But if I think from my notes, I've got what members' concerns are, and we'll see how far that takes us.
It's not an open-ended discussion. It's not an endless list, is it?
Can we have a vote on that then, please?
For deferral, Chairman.
Yeah.
Councillor Andrews,
For, Chairman.
Councillor Braxton,
For.
Councillor Cleary,
Against.
Councillor Goodrick,
Against.
Councillor Hope,
Against.
Councillor Mackenzie, oh sorry, not here, Councillor Mason,
For.
Councillor Potter, Councillor Thackeray, Councillor Windris. So the motion for deferral is succeeded by 5 votes to 4.
Thank you, members. Can we now proceed to the next item, which is on page 370, land at Cornborough Road, Sheriff Hutton.
Chairman, I think Jill's on the screen to present this particular application.
Which, if you just bear with me a moment, Chair. This is an application for the erection of one number 4 bedroom dwelling with attached 3-bay garage, workshop, storing greenhouse, and formation of new access drive with associated planting and landscaping works at Cornborough Road, Sheriff Hutton.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jill.
Okay, that's great. Members, yes, this is an application for a new dwelling in open countryside between Sheriff Hutton and Farlington at Cornborough on the, I think it's known as the Cornborough Road. It's an application for a dwelling which is being proposed under paragraph 79 of national policy. I think members are familiar with paragraph 79. It's the element of national policy that supports isolated dwellings in the countryside for a number of reasons, but this particular application is being promoted on the basis of it being an exceptional design quality, which is one of the criteria of paragraph 79. It is a proposal with a very strong and bold contemporary design. I think it's very much based on a sort of a modern interpretation of a farmstead, a farmhouse in the rural landscape. The proposal includes a house and ancillary buildings, which are effectively a connected series of distinct angular blocks that have very much a very much sort of an abstract shape and form, and I think members will be able to see that from some of the plans that are included with the report on the agenda. There are some areas of formal gardens immediately around the house and the buildings, and an entrance courtyard. And then the landscape design approach for the remainder of the site is very much a sort of a natural approach. So it includes additional woodland planting, hedge planting, and the creation of hay meadows. Members are aware that that national policy, in terms of paragraph 79, the starting point is effectively it applies to isolated proposals that are in isolated positions. That is effectively the first test that must be satisfied, and I think officers are of the view that this site, the dwelling on the site, the proposal does represent an isolated location, and therefore paragraph 79 does apply in this case, and it's relevant to apply paragraph 79 in the consideration and the determination of this application. Members are also aware that for a design to be of exceptional quality, the proposal does have to meet 2 specific tests of para 79, sometimes referred to as the 2 limbs of para 79. The first, that it has to be outstanding or innovative design that reflects the highest standards of architecture, And the second is that it would significantly enhance its immediate setting and be sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. Chairman, the report fully considers the proposal against these tests, the tests in national policy. I think certainly in terms of Limb 1, officers are of the view that it is an outstanding design. It's creative, it's unique, and it's imaginative, and it's based on a very strong design concept. And I think we do think it is very well connected to its site, rooted to its site, both in terms of its proportions, its siting, and its materials. And I think there's some of the key things that have helped us come to that conclusion that it satisfies Limb 1 in terms of being of an outstanding design. In terms of Limb 2, I think we're of the view that the landscape design approach, the reinstatement of some landscape features which are referred to in the report, and indeed the house itself as a piece of architecture, that the proposal does significantly enhance its immediate setting. And I think our view is that it is sensitive to the defining characteristics of the area. It retains key landscape features, fields, hedges, and it's very much sort of reflects some of the scattered farmsteads that are quite characteristic, well, very characteristic of this local landscape. As expected of national policy, by national policy, the proposal has been through some rigorous design review process, and it's evolved over time. And I think the scheme that we see before us has responded to many of the recommendations of the panel, which are documented in the design and access statement. So in officers' view, it's a proposal that meets the highest standards of architecture, which is required by national policy, and it meets the requirements of paragraph 79. I think in addition, we'd say there are a number of benefits that are associated with the proposal. There are benefits in terms of biodiversity net gain. And I think the building itself is or will be designed to include a number of sustainability measures. So it includes some solar PV roofing to ensure some renewable on-site electricity generation, ground source heat pump for as a renewable source of space and water heating. And I think it's also designed in terms of its orientation, its fenestration, its materials to be thermally efficient and to reduce energy loss. We take the view that it can be accommodated without an unacceptable impact on the landscape character and without impacting on the significance of heritage assets in the locality, and that it can be accommodated without detriment to the residential amenity of neighbouring residential occupiers. Chairman, I think just before we move to the presentation, I just want to touch on the sort of decision-making principles, really, because you'll note in the report that we've said that actually the paragraph 79 proposals such as this, you know, that they're not reflected in policy SP1 or policy SP2, the development plan. They're effectively not supported by that policy. So on the one hand, you could say that they conflict with the development plan. There is a form of conflict. On the other hand, it's quite clear that the development plan is silent on the issue of houses of outstanding design quality. And there is a reason for that. The reason for that is that the development plan was prepared at a time, and it's still the case now, that local planning authorities are not expected to repeat core elements of national policy in their local plans. Local plans are about local policies, and we have to defer effectively to national policy for key elements of national policy. So in the same way as our development plan doesn't repeat, for example, greenbelt policies or flood risk policies, we don't include the para 79 equivalent in effect. I just wanted to point that out because it is relevant to the decision-making process, and effectively the circumstances we're in is that national policy is afforded greater weight in these circumstances, it being a material consideration that effectively indicates otherwise. So if we could just move to the presentation, I'll take members through some photographs of the site. Thanks. So this is just a Google Earth image just to give you some sort of context of the site's location, Sheriff Hutton is about 1.7 kilometres to the east. And some members may be aware of the solar farm that's just on the outskirts of Sheriff Hutton at Cornborough, which is virtually immediately to the south of the site, which you can see in red on that map. I think it's in terms of the extent of the site, if you could just picture in your mind it being almost like divided in two parts, a southern section and a northern section. The southern section running almost from the point of where that the landscaping runs on the western edge across the site. The southern part is effectively the part that the dwelling and the access road will be located in. The northern part of the site will effectively remain largely as field, but as effectively a hay meadow rather than under arable production. So if we can just move to the next picture. So the pictures that I'm going to take you through really are effectively from within the site. There are very few long distance public views of the site. There are some from a public right of way to the east that are included within the landscape and visual impact assessment, but actually very difficult to distinguish the site from wider public vantage points. So if you just sort of imagine this is the entrance to the site up the Cornborough Road, so the southern part of the site looking north. And as I go through the photographs, I'm effectively going round the site in an anti-clockwise way. So I'm going round the southern boundary, up the eastern boundary, across the northern boundary, and then back the western boundary. So that's the access into the site, and you'll just recognise, or hopefully you'll see that hummock, the raised bit of land in the distance, and to the sort of the right of the picture. That hummock, I understand, is known as Lamb Hill, and that's quite an important feature of the site. The dwelling itself will be located to the west and to the front of that of Lamb Hill. So almost between where you see the three trees, between the sort of the first two trees on the site. So if we could just move to the next picture, please. Again, that's looking from the access road, looking directly north. I think the building that you can see on the not quite the skyline, but in the distance, is Cornborough Hall, which is a listed building about 650 metres to the north of the site. And that, I suppose, you can just see that has the Lamb Hill tapering out there on its western side. So the house is between the bottom of that hill. The proposed house will be between the bottom of that hill and that bit of vegetation that you can see on the left-hand side of the shot. So if we can just move to the next. Again, just looking from the southern part of the site in a sort of a northwesterly direction. And the next slide, please. And that's from the southern part of the site looking directly at Lamb Hill. The next slide, please. And that's just moving round towards on the eastern, the sort of southeastern section of the site, looking across. And you can just see the sort of as Lamb Hill dips down, you can almost see a little bit of a break in the landscaping there. There is actually a pond in that section of woodland, and the house itself is aligned. Effectively, it's an alignment between the pond and Lamb Hill. It's a sort of a not quite a west-east axis rather. We just move on to the next slide, please. This is taken from the eastern side of the site at Lamb Hill, looking in a sort of a northwesterly direction. Move on to the next slide. Thanks. And that's just, as I say, still the eastern edge of the site, looking towards the northern boundary. That first hedgerow that you can see is effectively forms the northern boundary of the site. Then there's a field and a field beyond that, and then, as you can see in the distance, there is the Cornborough Hall. I think you don't get a strong sense of that from that photograph, but actually that land, once you get past the hummock, which is Lamb Hill, the land starts to fall away in a sort of a northerly direction. Just move on to the next slide, please. This is the far northeastern corner of the site. There is actually another access into the site at that point, looking directly up towards Cornborough Hall, you can see in the distance. Can we take the next slide, please? And this is from that same position, but looking straight down the northern boundary, looking in a straight westerly direction. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And that again is from the northern boundary of the site, looking back in a southerly direction. Most of that the land that you can see in the front of that shot will form the hay meadow at the back of the site. Move on to the next shot, thank you. That's great. And that's another shot just looking across towards Lamb Hill in a sort of looking towards in a sort of southerly direction. So I think where you see the sort of the gap in the trees on the horizon there is it roughly equates to the sort of the access point to the site. So you can just see Lamb Hill there to the west, on the westerly side of the right hand side of the shot. The house itself, as I say, is positioned forward of Lamb Hill, but to effectively to the left of it on this photo. Its ground level is below the height of Lamb Hill. It's about the ground level of the proposed dwelling. It's about 3.6 meters below the top of Lamb Hill. And I think the highest point of the dwelling, which is the highest point of the apex of one of the roofs, is about 4.4 meters above the height of the top of Lamb Hill. So certainly from the north, there will be some elements of the building that will be seen, but not the entire northern elevation. It will sit, because of the topography, within the landscape. And I think I'd also add that from sort of these views, looking towards the dwelling, there is also effectively a green corridor, effectively a new section of hedge and woodland planting that will sit on the northern, beyond the northern elevation of the dwelling, just to help it sit within the landscape. We just move on to the next slide. That's I'm just trying to get my bearings, the northwestern corner of the site, looking back across at Lamb Hill. And I think you get a very strong sense there of the scale of the woodland planting that is in that southern section, or that surrounds that southern section of the site. We just move on to the next slide, thank you. And that's just from the western boundary of the site, looking again in a southerly direction. And you can just about make out the access point and the car on the access road in the sort of middle of the picture there. We'll move on to the next picture, please. This is taken from the western side of the site, looking directly across to Lamb Hill, so roughly following the alignment of the building group. We just move on to the next slide, please. And that is standing behind effectively where the last shot was taken from, behind the pond, again looking straight across towards Lamb Hill on the other side of that solitary tree there. So that's again, this is sort of just to give members the sense of the sort of the alignment of the dwelling and its immediate setting. Can you move on to the next slide, please? And that's just a picture of the access road into the site. You just get a glimpse of Lamb Hill through that gap in the woodland. And move on to the next slide, please. This is a picture taken from further west along the Cornborough Road at a field gate, looking across the site. So that effectively that gap in the hedgerow there, where you can just see the telegraph pole, is that is part of the site. The dwelling would be located behind those trees to the right of the shot, so it wouldn't be visible from that location. We just take the next picture, please. And that's just another shot from the Cornborough Road, looking at that field gate access, looking across to that gap in the hedgerow, and again gives another sort of impression of the scale of the woodland planting that the site and the house it's situated beyond. Just move on to the next shot, please. This is just a picture taken in winter, and I've just included it really just to give members a sort of it just gives an indication of really of the fact, the extent of the existing woodland on the site. And that even in wintertime, it is still quite a substantial amount of woodland that acts as screening, but also provides a very strong sense of seclusion for this site, which I think the design and the landscape proposals do engage with. Just move on to the next. And that again is another shot of looking from Lamb Hill across to the pond, some other farm buildings in the distance. Again, providing an indication of the sort of the amount of woodland cover that exists at the site. Move on to the next slide, please. The next three images are just some bird's eye computer generated images of the site, just to help bring some of the 2D plans in the agenda to life a little bit. So that's sort of looking from I suppose it's a southeasterly direction, looking towards the house. You can see the group of trees on the sort of the right hand side of the shot set in the field is some planting that is proposed to be reinstated at the top of on the top of Lamb Hill, and you get a sense there of the access to the site, the access that you've seen an image of, the driveway that sweeps round the eastern side of the site to a courtyard, and the alignment of the building group between the pond and effectively the hummock of Lamb Hill. Move on to the next slide, please. And this is, I suppose, an aerial shot from taken from a sort of northwesterly bird's eye view, looking down at the building group. I think that shot does illustrate the fact that there will be planting behind the rear of the building group, the northern elevation of the building group. And the final slide, please. Thank you. Just another effectively 3D image taken from a sort of a northeasterly direction, bird's eye view, looking across at how the building group sits within the landscape, and that I think shows perhaps the strongest image of the alignment between the pond and Lamb Hill. I think that's the end of all of the photographs and the images. That's right. Thank you. Chairman, I think all of the issues have been outlined in the report, and the recommendation is as outlined in the report. Thank you.
We have two speakers. First of all, Josie Taylor, and you have 3 minutes, Josie.
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can
Hello?
hear you.
Oh, right, okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Right, Josie Taylor, I'm an objector. Both local residents and the parish council strongly oppose this development, and their views should be taken into consideration. Contrary to the planning officer's description of Cornborough, it is in fact a settlement that can be traced back to the 11th century. The development is within the settlement boundaries on Cornborough Road, opposite a solar park, and in proximity to neighbouring properties. Simply by having trees on two sides does not visibly or physically separate the site from the rest of Cornborough. No Cornborough resident would consider their home to be in an isolated location. As tackling climate change is at the top of the government's agenda, it seems reasonable to expect that any Para 79 development designed to set the standard for the next generation should be striving for zero carbon emissions. There is nothing new or groundbreaking about the technologies proposed. By not pioneering the merits of the very latest sustainable technologies, this development fails to push the boundaries of country house architecture as inferred by Para 79. Design is subjective. Some will like the design, but others, in the words of Prince Charles, it is a carbuncle on the landscape. The planning officer clearly believes in this design, but there is no escaping the fact that the rear north-facing elevation will be seen out of context from the wider design. Even the design review panel, in addition to their criticisms of the zinc roof, also states that the rear elevations are rather dumb. I quote, "There are some reservations about the scale of the garage and outbuildings, especially as their rear elevations are rather dumb as currently depicted. This reinforces the fact that these elevations will not be seen as a definable house, comfortable in its landscape setting, but an extremely high wall running across the skyline, incongruous with the surrounding landscape." In conclusion, a development seeking approval under Para 79 should be a landmark building, truly exceptional, using new methods and new technologies. This development does not raise the bar in driving forward the very latest innovations in sustainable carbon reducing technologies. Despite the planning officer's enthusiasm for the design review panel voiced concerns on the scale of the development and considered the rear elevations rather dumb. The case for isolation is not proven, and this application
Can you
should not
can you finish, please, because your time is up.
and therefore should be refused. Can I repeat that last point as I was interrupted, or was everybody happy with it?
I think you've overrun your time, Josie.
Thank you very much.
Can we now next go to Mr. Blenkham, the agent, please? Are you there, Mr. Blenkham?
I am indeed, yes. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you.
Have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. We've been working on this project for over 2 years on behalf of our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Arthur and Liz Woodhouse. Arthur and Liz have a close affinity to the site, having previously lived at Cornborough Hall, where they spent several years restoring the house to its current condition. They retained the land in question in the hope that one day they could build their forever home there. The opportunity to design and build on this land has been made possible through the introduction of paragraph 79 of the MPPF. Key to making an application under this policy is the ability of the scheme to have a narrative which routes the scheme to the site. To prove the worth of any idea, the project has been taken to design review on 2 occasions. The first review was to test the ability of the site to accommodate a scheme. Having determined that it had that capacity, a further review was held some 4 months later. This follow-up review concluded that the revised scheme is very justifiable and with further details sustaining the same degree of sensitivity and rigour, is thought to be on track to be an outstanding design. Following this last review, we've developed the scheme further in close collaboration with a landscape architect, an ecologist and energy consultant to arrive at the scheme you see before you today. The scheme transforms a simple parcel of arable land into a rich, fertile habitat into which the new house comfortably sits. The building has been designed to be carbon neutral through the inclusion of high levels of insulation, south-facing solar gain, ground source heat pump, and solar PV panels. The key to the project is what makes a design exceptional. Exceptional design stems from a clear understanding and interpretation of a client brief, and then translating that into a beautiful poetic composition which sits seamlessly into its setting. Most great buildings have a narrative, a story to say why and how they were conceived. Exceptional buildings have a sense that they were meant to be, buildings that enhance their setting and make statements of beauty in their own right. They are buildings to take your breath away. They capture your imagination without you knowing why. Arthur and Liz have a compelling relationship to this site, and the resulting piece of architecture has been very well received by design review.
You have
Most
30
importantly,
seconds.
by your own authority, who've concluded, it is considered that the design of the proposed dwelling is of exceptional quality, which meets the standard required by paragraph 79E of the MPPS. It is a truly outstanding design. We are appreciative of this response and hope that members also are, and therefore able to lend their support to this imaginative project on behalf of Arthur and Liz Woodhouse. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members have any questions? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Chair. It's related to the carbon neutrality of the development and the claim it's carbon neutral. I welcome the ground source heat pumps. I welcome the solar PV. I'm welcoming the insulation and the efficiencies. I'm just a little confused about how the claim of carbon neutral can be when there's no potential batteries involved or storage of energy as well for nighttime use. That's only my question is, does the solar PV include battery storage, for instance?
Question.
Jill?
Chairman?
Jill, yes, we can hear you.
I'm afraid I don't know the answer to the question. I think that the architect has confirmed that he believes that that it will be a carbon zero build. They've specified some of the sustainability credentials. I think we were able to condition that specification. I don't know whether that satisfies Councillor Mason's concerns. I think one of the points that I would make is just coming back to the point that, you know, under paragraph 79 and national policy, a scheme does not have to be groundbreaking. You know, it can be a high standard of design, outstanding design, or innovative. It doesn't have to be both. And often the sustainability credentials for schemes have been promoted on the basis that the schemes are meeting that innovative test. Clearly, as time moves on and technology catches up, it's harder and harder for Para 79 applications to demonstrate that they are truly innovative in terms of sustainable technologies. So it's not a requirement of Para 79 and national policy that these buildings are carbon zero and built to high standards and use groundbreaking technologies. We'd like to think that that they do well, they do perform well, which I believe this scheme does do.
Thank you. Are any other questions? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Chairman. Really, just a bit of guidance. The more Para 79 applications we get, the more confused I get. And I'm trying to be consistent about them. I'm trying to be consistent because we've had 4 Para 79, 3 or 4 Para 79 in the last few years, none of which really sort of helped each other's applications. More specifically, can we define isolated? Is it a distance measure or a vision measure? And more importantly, how do we define if something significantly enhances the landscape? Is there any further information or advice that the committee might get?
Well, I think, Chairman, I've tried to address the isolation point in the report. I think there is a reference to some case law, in fact, that where it was found that, you know, isolated was effectively a position that was outside effectively a defined settlement and a defined settlement limit. You know, I think it is a judgment. This site, this building, is not located within a settlement as we would know it. I completely understand that the area known as Cornborough is considered by those who live there to be a settlement. That's fair enough, but it's not a defined settlement in the sense that it is a village with defined village limits. It is an isolated location, and I think certainly if you read the extract in the committee report about the definition of isolated that was established through that case law, it is clear that it is an isolated location. In terms of significantly enhancing its setting, I think again that is a judgment. It comes with the whole package of what is being proposed, both in terms of landscape design, biodiversity improvements, and the architecture itself. I think where we have, in comparison to some of the other schemes that you've mentioned, Councillor Cleary, 2 of those 4 paragraph 79 applications were in nationally protected landscape, were in the AONB. And I think there is a higher bar in some respects for applications in those sorts of settings because of the duty that's placed on us to conserve and enhance the landscape, which, you know, protected landscapes. So I think it's that significantly enhance the landscape is a harder test in protected landscapes. I think when it comes to outside of protected landscapes, it's the package of the proposal, and to me that is the landscape design, the approach to landscape design, the biodiversity improvements, and the architecture itself. I think the building itself can enhance its setting.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm surprise, I'm looking at the sustainable credentials as well. And the only reference I could find in all this paperwork, without ploughing through the whole of the planning portal, was the paragraph on page 378. That doesn't mention carbon neutrality. And I believe from the pre-meeting that there had to be a further request for details as well. So I'd just like Jill to confirm that we're happy that we can condition, and the applicants are therefore happy that we can condition this carbon neutrality as part if it's passed. Thank you.
Jill, can you hear us?
I can, Chairman. Can you hear me?
We can now.
Okay. I think it's probably fair to say that the sustainability credentials could have been a bit more explicit in the supporting information. I think the predicted energy assessment, performance assessment, alluded to some of the credentials. It referred to the ground source heat pump and the solar panels. what the architects have done, they've amended the plans to show the solar panels. They've also included the position of the ground source heat pump on plans, and they've sort of listed on the same plan the other sort of sustainability credentials, which include reference to the build being carbon neutral, which we can then, refer to that in a condition. We can link that by condition.
Thank you. Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Can the officer please confirm that the woodland in front of the proposed development is within the control of the applicant, and that there are no designs to crop that woodland in any way, and it will be maintained for the future going forward? Because we've fallen foul of this before, where woodland has been used for screening and then it's been chopped down by the Forestry Commission. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Chairman, all of the woodland planting is within the red line of the application, the existing planting as well as the additional planting. It forms part of the landscape master plan, which again would be conditioned as part of any decision.
Councillor Thackeray.
Very straight question. There doesn't appear to be any reference to a local needs occupancy condition on this property. There seems to be a list as long as my arm of every policy apart from that one. But I presume that the applicant actually does qualify. Could you explain why there's no imposition of a local needs occupancy condition? And if there isn't one, why isn't there one, and where does it refer to it in the policy?
I can, Councillor Thackeray. The local needs occupancy condition doesn't apply. And that comes back to the point I made in the introduction about the local needs occupancy condition is a local policy. It's a policy within our development plan that is applied to new dwellings in those locations where the development plan, our local plan, looks to accommodate new housing. And it's applied to ensure that effectively the limited supply of houses in some locations are provided for people with a local need. So it's local policy. I've already explained that through paragraph 79, this is national policy, and it's different to what is applied locally. It's set aside from that. So it's not covered by our local policy, and we wouldn't be able to apply the local needs occupancy condition. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I know that the applicants have a very strong connection with the site, and I expect they would meet the local needs occupancy condition if where they live now, which I believe is Flaxton, is a neighbouring parish, but I'm not sure whether it is off the top of my head. But there is a very close connection.
Thank you. And also, one thing that I'd just like to flag up, really for the benefit of the committee and officers, and with the view to the future, because paragraph 79E, you yourself said that it had to be in a rural setting. My interpretation of the wording does not concur with that opinion. Section E, paragraph E, the design of exceptional quality in that it is truly outstanding or innovative, we agree on that point, reflecting the highest standards in architecture, and would help raise standards of design more generally in rural areas. I don't read that as being specifically necessarily a rural area, but what I would like to advocate is that indeed we do learn from these exceptional architectural dwellings and introduce some of the design elements, some of the wondrous and innovative designs into the ordinary planning policy of this council, so that we could have exciting looking buildings in villages and not just in isolated locations where there is clearly a vast amount of money to spare to buy such things. I'd like to see this in all over Ryedale, bright colours and new. Thank you.
Was that a question?
I could soon turn it into one.
Are there any more questions? Can we then go on to debate, please? Whose ward is this? Is this your Councillor Cleary? Councillor Hope. Do you wish to speak, Councillor Hope?
Sorry, yes. Yeah, thanks, Jill, for your expert input, and the other officers as well. I'm sorry, but I'll keep going till my voice goes, but it's likely to go. At first I looked at this site and I thought, oh my goodness, where's this come from? But the more you look at it, and the more that you have to sit at home watching them in Home and Away and one thing and another, looking at different housing, the more you think, well, it's not bad. And this one just had this wow factor when you looked at it. Thought, but it did look good. Sorry, do you want to take over? Yeah, I mean, the wood houses, they do live at Flaxton, by the way, and it's very good and put in business. He's got a very good business. He's a good employer, and I think this property is worth looking at. I'll go along with the conditions that the. I'm sorry.
Do you wish to propose the officer's recommendation, Councillor Hope?
Well said. Yes, please.
Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I thought that was where Eric was going with this. Well, you won't be surprised when I say I'm not surprised to see this application before us, because we considered the opening of this woodland, and you had to actually ask yourself why, and this was obviously in the offing. I've looked at this. It's been to the Design Council, and let's be honest, Ryedale District Council seems to have a record of supporting Para 79 developments. And whilst personally I haven't always supported them due to the location, usually because they're in AONBs, and I don't think that's where we should be developing anything. On this occasion, you will be astounded to know that I actually can support this application, and I would move or second Councillor Hope's proposal that we go with the officer recommendation, because I can't see what harm this will do. It will sit between the solar panel and Corn Rabanna, which was restored by the applicants, and we allowed both of those applications, so I don't see why we shouldn't allow this one.
Councillor Mason.
Yes, I have to agree with Councillor Goodrick's points here. I suppose I have a little note, probably to the architect here, on his claim for this carbon neutrality, and it really annoys me when they put these claims in that it's clearly not quite carbon neutral. You have solar panels and ground soil heat pump, one feeds the other. There's a lot more to becoming a carbon neutral property. The efficiencies are good, but nighttime use is really important as well to take in consideration when you're making bold claims. My advice would be put some battery storage in, then you can basically say it would be even more carbon neutral. That's my main point on this, really, is it gets really aggravates me when lazy architects turn around and make these claims without actually backing them up with the data. As a renewable energy company doing this to businesses, I know full well how to make net zero plans for companies.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm glad Councillor Goodrick mentioned that one, because the address jumped out at me, because it was a mere 10 months ago, which I believe is less than 2 years, that we had this application for a new field access claimed to be for improved woodland maintenance. And I was alone in commenting that the justification for this access, and I quote, didn't add up. I was also alone in voting against it for that very reason. and I don't regard house building as woodland maintenance. So a design panel of experts has decided this house will indeed be sufficiently innovative to pass the test of Para 79 of the NPPF, although I was deeply disappointed at the lack of any clarity or information regarding its energy efficiency, heat, power generation, all of which must clearly be innovative when compared to their absence from national and local policy. Now, this innovation must be balanced against the lack of compliance with our local plan. And I'm not really convinced that it does enough to that it does enough to tip that balance. And I have supported the last two of these Para 79 applications, but there I was looking at very definite, bold plans that I would like to think could be carried through into general architecture, although, as Councillor Thackeray has alluded to, it's somewhat difficult throughout the whole district, given the money available. But yeah, this is all about a balance, and there is clear lack of compliance with the local plan outside the developments areas and so on. So the only thing really in favour of this is the innovation, and in this case I really don't see enough innovation to support it. Thank you.
Before I come back to Councillor Mason, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Mason.
This is more of a question, actually, because Mike and Caroline have both referenced this back to a previous application, and I was sitting there thinking, I recognise this, and it's become clear. And I think the previous application was for woodland access. Now, my question in my head at the time was going, well, surely 10 months was that enough time to get this plan together? And looking on here, it was 15th of the 10th, 2019. So I assume the plans were in place before they asked for this woodland access. Just that puts a real level of trust in me. I trusted the planning system to approve the woodland access, and now this has jumped on my table. I'm finding this deeply uncomfortable now, to be brutally honest.
You've got to deal with what you've got in front of you. You can't presuppose what might come.
Councillor Cleary.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Housen has already said it, but I was going to say we deal with what's in front of us. Nobody. I certainly saw the previous application. Councillor Potter isn't alone, and it wasn't alone at all in wondering what was going on. But we had to look at the application in front of us, and there was no reason to. There was no material planning reason for us not to go with that. None of us knew what was happening. A lot of us had a fairly inkling, but we're not allowed to deal with that. We deal with what's in front of us.
Thank you for your wisdom, Michael.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? I would simply say that I agree with Councillor Potter. I also agree with the objector. I think it's a carbuncle, but there we are. So I should be voting against it. Do the officers wish to come back?
No, Chairman. I've made a note that it's been moved and seconded for approval, unless there are any more comments.
Can we move to the vote, please? Would you like to take the vote, Gary, please?
Thank you. So this is a vote for approval. Councillor Andrews?
Against?
Councillor Brackstone?
Against.
Councillor Cleary?
Against.
Against approval. Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Hope?
For.
Councillor Mason?
Against approval.
Councillor Potter?
Against.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
And Councillor Windress?
For.
That is 5 votes against approval and 4 votes for. I didn't actually get your reasons for refusal, but perhaps you could outline those for me.
Well, I think Councillor Potter outlined the reasons. It's just a matter of you encapsulating that in planning language, Gary.
To be brutally frank, Chairman, I didn't really get that, other than I think Councillor Potter said something along the lines of this proposal being contrary to policy, but I didn't capture any more reason than that.
I think the reason from my point of view was it's not the claim of innovative on carbon neutrality is quite a wild claim, and if they're using it with paragraph 79, then they need to come back to the table and show us how innovative it is, because.
If I might add, Chairman, I went against the. I am not convinced it is makes a significant enhancement to the landscape.
And can I just add that on page 375, paragraph 3, the proposal is contrary to policies SP1 and SP2 on the basis that it doesn't meet any of the circumstances under which dwellings in the open countryside are supported in principle by the development plan.
Could I just make a comment on what you said, Michael? Because I know where you're picking that up from, but the actual policy 79 doesn't say that. It says that.
Sorry, whether that decision will carry weight. We need to be very careful about this decision. I rarely use this, but I think it's significant that we need to capture the precise reasons for refusal, bring those back to the next meeting, and see whether or not that bears water. Okay?
Are we all agreed? We defer on that basis?
I'll just invoke the cooling off period and bring back what I think is the decision that you would like to make. Okay, thank you.
Next item, which is on page 441, ProPack. Yes, Councillor Hope. I'm just wondering, actually, would members fancy a comfort break at the moment? Just 5 minutes, please.
Thank you.
think Councillor Windris has left the meeting, and so has Councillor Hope. I think I think everybody else is here. Rather than, am I right about that? Yeah, right. Item number 10 then, which is the Hutton Zambo Parish Council, the application for the erection of raw materials and finished goods cold stores, including product development offices and associated car parking, service yard and landscaping for Propac Food Limited at 7th Street, Malton. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. In fact, the case officer, Alan Goforth's on annual leave this week, so he's delegated this one upwards in the same tradition. And I've just got the one update really in relation to the report, which members will see. We were awaiting the comment from the lead local flood authority in relation to drainage, and we actually got their comments at 18 minutes to 6 this evening. so we shan't be subject to. You'll all be relieved to know that they're happy with all of the details, but have made a recommendation that additional conditions relating to the submitted design, everything should be developed in accordance with the submitted drainage designs, and just a general confirmation that there should be no discharge of surface water until the wider site drainage is complete. So that's covered off the surface water drainage issue that was outstanding when the report was put together. I think rather than, I don't think there are any other updates to the report, and initially I was understood that a Mr. Guest, who's the applicant, may have registered to speak, but I gather he no longer does. So if we can just go straight to the presentation, that would be helpful. Thank you. This first slide is effectively an aerial photograph just to orient people. It is actually in Hutton Zambo Parish, but it's visually on the edge of Malton, on the edge of the industrial estate there. So what you have there in 2007 was what was the western extent of the established part of York Road Industrial Estate, and as you can see there, the location of the Propac building, the historical Propac building. In fact, that's quite an old photograph because it's before the Tara Park new development was carried out. So you can see on the 2020 photograph, the Tara Park development's already extended westwards. But also what you have then on this next parcel of land is the Enterprise Park development, which is further to the west with an access off York Road. And those of you familiar with the entrance to the site will be familiar where the entrance is next to, I think it's Tool Station, and the road bends round, and the parcel of land where a large part of this development would be located is that first plot on the Enterprise Park, which actually backs onto the existing Propac premises. So this scheme actually involves extensions on the old site, but also extensions on the new site. So if we can go to the next next photograph, you can see at the moment a large part of the site on the new site is actually used for parking for Propac employees, and but you can see where locations of the proposed extensions are in relation to the existing buildings, with the office addition access via 7th Street, which is the more established roadway, but the other warehouse and production areas off the new access road. So just go to the next slide. So this is a 3D imagery to give you an idea of how the new buildings will look. One of the issues there you'll immediately spot is the extension on the western side is a taller building, and that was one of the issues that there was a concern from some quarters that the taller building would be intrusive in landscape terms when viewed from the AONB. I think it's fair to say, obviously, when you're approaching Malton from the south on the A64, you are looking down on the industrial estate as you come down Golden Hill. But our judgment is that you're seeing this proposed taller building in the context of a surrounding existing industrial area So it's not a sort of an intrusive building in that sense. It's not on the edge of the settlement and taller and obtrusive in that sense. So if we go to the next photo, this is showing this is a view of the existing building viewed from the 7 Street, can't get this, from the 7 Street entrance. And the office addition would be in this area. You can go to the next slide. And this is just a view panning round. So you get a feel for some of these buildings have sort of evolved over the years and fairly utilitarian in appearance, some of the older buildings. You go to the next view. This is your view back the other way. And the next view. And this is an image of how that office extension might look if approved. So I think there's a feeling that these buildings are generally sort of a little bit of a step up in terms of where we currently are on some of the older parts of the site. You can go to the next one. So this is a view looking backwards from the new estate road, looking towards the newer part of the development on the road frontage. This is the backs of the properties on industrial premises on the York Road. So you're looking at the back of, I think it's Tool Station there, and is it Screwfix? My eyesight's losing me. But here you just get a feel for the fact that actually the application site is slightly lower than the adjacent land. There's a little bit of a land rise on what would be the landscaped area. Next photograph. And this is panning across from where that last photograph was taken towards the back of the existing premises, which is Propac. Okay, next. And this is just panning round. And the next photograph. And panning round again. So the new extension, or the western new extension, would be sat in this area here. And the next photograph. So this is step back from where that photograph was taken. As you see, you drop back down again to lower level. So some of the existing planting will grow up in time, but as you can see, the profile of the existing buildings and the new extension would sit in front of those. Thank you. So this is an indication, again, a bit of artist's impression there, I think, but looking back towards that direction. So you can see this building in the foreground is a taller building than the ones that are on site at the moment. The materials and the approach to the cladding is sort of very similar to what's already been done on parts of the new estate with a similar landscaping approach. I think it's fair to say that the landscaping is a step up from the older parts of the industrial area. Next slide. So this is on the car park looking back out towards the western edge of the new extension area. So what you've got on the back there is I'll call it the strategic landscaping on the newer part of the industrial estate, which forms the western edge. So that's been planted and growing for, crikey, 6, 7, 8 years now, and is starting to become a more effective screen. Thank you. And this is again panning back. So these are some of the bigger buildings that are located on the back of the new extension area. And as you can see, these are bigger buildings. So you've got the JM Packaging building and other buildings that are located to the south of those. And although this proposed extension in this location is slightly taller than those buildings, you can see that they're not on the edge of the settlement. Next photograph, please. And this is just another view from within the car parking area. Look towards the back of the existing Propac building. The next one. And panning round. And again. And that's towards the entrance to the site. And again. And this is looking back out on towards the junction of the new estate with the York Road. And the next one. This is back the other way, so it gives you a feeling of, although this site's going to be prominent when you're looking at it from the entrance from the newer York Road entrance, it's actually already in the environs of an existing employment area. And the next one. Again, this sort of gives you an idea of the sort of less than salubrious parts of the Propac building as it currently is. And the next one. And again, that's just the existing service area. And the next one. and this is then again a more of a close-up. So beyond that, you're going over the road and you're looking at the rising land towards, I suppose that's rising up towards Castle Howard Road. And the next one. And this is the view along York Road, so most members probably wouldn't go beyond there. You're travelling off, that's the the entrance slip onto the A64 just beyond the national speed limit sign. And the next one. And this is the view back into town. So on the left-hand side behind the lorry there, you've got the BMW garage in the distance and the Mini garage. And obviously on the right-hand side, you've got the more established parts of the York Road Industrial Estate. And I think that might be it. Oh no, one back into the site. So yes, the extension, the bigger extension building would be facing you as you enter the industrial area from this point, and the main estate road winds off to the right and goes around the application site. And I think that's the last one. No, this is the last one. So that's the scale of the building. It gives you an idea of the scale of the building. So it's another bit higher than the existing industrial buildings. So I'm hoping that's the last one now. Yes. So I've got no more updates, Chairman. That's it from me. And
Right.
there are no speakers.
There are no speakers, so can we go straight into questions? Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Thackeray.
Yes, just that not knowing that Alan Goforth was on holiday, I sent an email to Alan a day or two ago asking for some more information on this application, i.e. Because the development will cause an increase in traffic on York Road, HGVs will be in and out of York Road, which is an air quality management area, and I haven't failed to be able to find an air quality impact assessment.
There isn't an air quality impact assessment, Councillor Thackeray. I mean, the development is located on the allocated employment land area, so this is what we're expecting to see on there. I mean, having said that, this was a development that sort of had its inception in 2010 and 11. That's when the permission was first granted to, I think it was Harrison's. But at that time, that permission also had a number of things relating to traffic issues and travel plans and the like, which have been brought forward in this scheme. So there is a condition relating to that in the recommendation, but there isn't a specific air quality assessment. But we did actually consult with our environmental health colleagues on it. I mean, there wasn't a requirement for an air quality assessment. We did consult with them. And Rob Robinson took the view that he didn't think there was a need for an air quality assessment based on the details of the application. But I think in that sense, I mean, clearly Rob's involvement with the air quality work that's been going on for several years now. I mean, I think the context for that is we haven't had an exceedance in the air quality management area for 5 years. So the general trajectory is downwards in terms of pollution. So as an application, I don't think he felt that there was an actual need for the air quality impact assessment for this application. So that was the answer. I was half expecting the question, to be honest, Councillor Thackeray.
Any more questions? In that case, can we go to debate? I think it's Councillor Cleary's area.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's in Derwent Ward. I wonder, for the benefit of councillors, if you could put up the photograph showing the artist's impression, the overall artist's impression that was in the display earlier on in the...
All the way back at the start.
Towards the start, if you could, it would just help. If you could.
You might need to go all the way back.
Yeah, sort of. It was near the beginning, yeah. Keep going, keep going. There you go. There you go. Right. Yeah, I was, first of all, I do welcome this application and I am going to support it and move approval. In justifying that, it is an improvement and an enhancement. If you look at that overall design, there were objections to the overall height. And patently, as we heard in the report, the building is somewhat higher than some of the surrounding. But I think, councillors, you can agree that the design and its overall, it is less discordant, much concordant with itself, and it does disguise the bulk, of any increase in height. So I think the design by itself overcomes some of the objections. Other than that, I simply go with the officer's recommendation insofar as it accords with the policies and is to be welcomed in the district. Thank you.
Councillor Mason.
I suppose it echoes what Michael's saying, actually. I think this is a good development in the right place for a business that is providing quite a lot of jobs in the area.
Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Chair. Going to do my usual stuck record bit now. Well, being as we're looking at that picture, can I see a single solar panel on there on that vast expansive roof? No. Well, firstly, we had a useful discussion at the pre-meet yesterday regarding the attenuation of surface water runoff, and I'm aware we're likely to need a condition on that to ensure compliance, and I'm quite happy with that. But no SUDs are planned. It's just the usual completely ineffective condition that says utilise SUDs wherever possible, with no support from policy or any clear obligation. And after 3 years on this committee, I'm yet to see a site where it's been deemed possible, despite it actually being possible on virtually every site. But until there is some compulsion or proper policy behind it, it's just not going to happen. There's no renewables, there's no PV, despite the fact that this is planned for refrigeration. There are electric fridges or freezers under that, and it could have PV panels sitting powering them all on the top. Oh, does it? Oh, no, I've missed that one. But again, we've not got the policy support or the obligation. So, because we've not got this policy support or any obligation, it makes it unsustainable, it's negligent, and it's clearly doing nothing to reach our stated climate targets. Well, not ours, the government's. But to conclude, we haven't got the necessary policy support, so there's no reason to refuse this. It's just irritating that it's not doing what it should be doing. Thank you, Chair.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Chairman. I do hear what Councillor Potter is saying, and I think there is some PV on it, but let's not go there. The top and bottom of it, this is a well-established business in Moulton, providing lots of jobs and value to the economy. It's in the right place. It's a sensitive design, although it's bigger than everything else. And frankly, I've got no problem seconding the proposal, which I think my colleague Councillor Cleary made, that we approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, I agree with all of that. Does anybody else wish to speak, or can we go straight to the vote? Right, we'll go to the vote.
Thank you, Chairman. This is item 10 with a vote for approval. Councillor Andrews?
Approve.
Councillor Braxton?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Hope's left. Councillor Mackenzie's left. Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
And Councillor Windris, I think, has left as well. So I think that's 7 votes for approval, no other votes, Chairman. So unanimous.
It's approved then. Should we go then to item number 11, which is Carrow Food Group, the erection of extension of existing industrial unit to provide automatic continuous freezer, palletiser and leading dock at Westfield Way, Norton, and it's on page 547. Can we have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. If we could just move to the aerial photograph, that would be really helpful. If we could have that just in front of us. Brilliant, thank you. Yes, so Caro Foods is a long-established business which occupies extensive industrial premises on the Norton Industrial Estate, which is designated as employment land within the Ryedale Plan. The application site is also located within the development limits of Norton. As you can see from the map, to the north of the site is public highway with further industrial units sited to the north. Beyond these, there is residential development, which will be located at a distance of approximately 90 metres from the nearest part of the proposed building. To the east and west are also industrial buildings, and to the south are further buildings associated with Caro. The site is currently accessed and egressed from the entrance on Hudson Way, which is to the east. As noted, this proposal seeks permission for the erection of an extension to an existing industrial unit to provide an automatic continuous freezer, palletizer and loading dock. This application is only before members of Planning Committee because of the size of the proposed building. There have been no objections and there's been a letter of support from the Town Council. The building would be located in what is currently used as a yard area to the north of the existing building, and that's just illustrated on that aerial map. And if I could just go to the first photograph, please, that would be great. So this is the photograph of the access from Hudson Way, which is also presently the point of exit from the site. And the next photo will show you just a view from that angle, but further north, just allowing you to see some of the other types of buildings associated with the Caro production. The third photograph is in the site looking towards where the building would be located in the yard. And from this photograph, you can see that the positioning of the building would be broadly directly in front of the central green building, which has the eave-line face and not the gable-ended one, which is just the left-hand side of that. The building to the left-hand side is is the refrigeration plant room and condensers that were approved in 2019. The next photograph is from a similar location, but looking eastwards towards the other buildings within the site. The new building would be no further northwards than that blue building, which is visible at a little bit of a distance there. The next photograph is a view partly northwards, and you can appreciate the other industrial buildings which are to the north of Westfield Way at that point. The next photograph is a similar one. I really wanted to show you these buildings here, and that also shows the kind of boundary of the site at the moment, which doesn't have any landscaping. As you'll be aware from the report, there is a landscaping condition that will hope to secure some additional landscaping along that point. The next photograph will show the business to the west, which is Nico, and the next photograph along is a view taken from a more southerly central point within the site, and the green building just on the kind of left-hand side behind the lorry is the refrigeration building that I pointed out to you just before. The next photograph is a view from the southeast looking towards where the building will be located, and the next photograph is a view from Westfield Way, and it's showing where the access is that will be brought into use for the exiting of vehicles to sort of create that one-way system. And the final photograph is just another view along Westfield Way. You can see some of the landscaping that's towards the eastern part of the northern boundary. So hopefully with this condition that could be secured to be brought along the whole northern boundary of the site. Sorry, excuse me. So as detailed in the design and access statement, the project will reorganise the product flow to separate the goods in and goods out. It was noted that at present, the goods in and out are handled through the same loading area and marshalling area, and that results in an excessively busy inside and traffic movements within the yard. The new layout will provide a dedicated one-way route for collections. The design and access continues to note that the building will house a new automatic continuous freezer and palletizer area, and this will be a more energy efficient method of lowering product temperature. The requirement for cooling will be provided by the existing adjacent plant room that I pointed out in those photographs. In a supporting letter dated the 24th of June, the Chief Engineer from Carrow confirmed that the introduction of the new freezing facility will allow Carrow to freeze on site all products that are currently frozen off-site by a third party, and they confirmed that at present they don't have the ability to freeze on site. And during my site visit, the engineer confirmed verbally that this arrangement would provide additional environmental and business efficiencies for Carrow, as it would enable fully loaded lorries to leave the site rather than partially loaded lorries, which often occurs presently. So in terms of the principle of the development, as noted in the report, the principle which relates to the expansion of an existing building to allow the continued growth of a successful local food manufacturing business is acceptable in accordance with policy SP6. In terms of character and form, the proposal is also considered acceptable. It would incorporate larger proportions than the nearest adjoining buildings, but within the wider site, as you'll have been able to appreciate, there is variety in terms of the kind of form and character of buildings, but the materials and general form will match the buildings that are most closely located, including in colour finish. And I did note that the applicant has agreed their willingness to accept the landscaping condition, which is welcomed. In terms of amenity, the council's environmental health team were consulted and confirmed that they had no objection to the proposal, noting the surrounding buildings that will afford protection to the dwellings to the north. There was further narrative also received, which I detailed in the report, in relation to noise, and the Chief Engineer had noted there would be no greater noise associated with the project as the new equipment is being connected to the existing plant. The scheduling of transport would not change, the only difference being that the product is currently dispatched fresh would be dispatched frozen. And the environmental health team reconfirmed their response of no objection to the proposal. It's not considered that this additional building will result in a material impact beyond the present works undertaken, given this area is already in use as an active yard. Neither is it considered that the new proposed exit arrangements would have any impact, as it would be commensurate with the vehicles using the existing T-junction between Hudgeon Way and Westfield Way. Given the major size of the development, the lead local flood authority were appropriately consulted, and it is noted that the proposed building will be undertaken on land that is presently hard standing, and it wouldn't result in a net increase in developed land. The submitted documents note the drainage will continue to connect to the existing nearby positive drainage system. The lead local flood authority were content, and appropriate conditions to secure that have been recommended. North Yorkshire Highways were consulted and had no objections subject to the conditions in the report. And Norton Town Council had responded to confirm approval of the scheme, and as I'd noted, there were no further responses received from any third parties. Therefore, it is an officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Right. There are no there are no speakers, so can I have questions, please? Councillor Mason.
I'll get there before you, Mike. Is there any renewable energy provision for this site?
Not that I am aware of as part of this application. As we discussed in the pre-meet, there are such a huge range of buildings. I didn't look at them all individually, so I can't comment on that categorically. But there are general environmental benefits to the...
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think you can see the point coming in debate.
Councillor Potter. Sorry, I thought you were. But are there any more questions? No, then let's go straight into the debate.
Yeah, can I go first?
I think it's not actually my ward, but it's next to my ward, isn't it? So I think I'll go first and say I thank the officers for the report. I'm pleased to see the investment these companies are putting into Moulton and Norton. It gives confidence to business in the area, and I'm quite happy to move the officers' recommendation. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Potter?
Yeah, I don't want to disappoint you, so I'll keep it brief. It's a big extension with a load of freezers in. Ditto. Exactly what I said last time. But yes, I can quite happily support this one. So I'll second it.
Any more speakers? Can we do the vote, please, Gary? Sorry, unless you want to speak to add anything.
No, thank you, Chair. This is a vote for approval as recommended. Councillor Andrews, this is for
Chair.
approval. Councillor Braxton.
For.
Councillor Cleary.
For.
Councillor Goodrich.
For.
Councillor Hope's gone. Councillor Mason.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Thackeray.
For.
I think that's it. That's 7 votes for, 0 against, Chairman. So unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. We now go on to item 12, which is the full application for change of use of agricultural land to allow siting of 3 number camping pods with associated parking and access track to be used in connection with Deepdale Farm, wedding venue and airbub use, and so on at Deepdale Farmhouse, Village Street, Keldholme, Kirby Moorside. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. If we could just go to the aerial map, that would be brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, the application site relates to Deepdale Farm. It's a site that lies to the east of the village of Keldholme and north of the A170 in an area of high landscape value. The site incorporates a livery business, some existing holiday accommodation, and has permission to offer wedding events between May to September, which was approved under application number 1701455 that I think was approved in 2018. The site is accessible by 2 accesses. The original access is taken between Moorcroft and Sunnycroft, which is highlighted on the aerial map, passing via Southview from the village street. As part of the 2017 application, an additional access was proposed and constructed, accessed via Bog Hall Farm to the north of the village, taken from Grey Lane, which you can just see on the aerial map as well. This was conditioned to be used for all livery, wedding and holiday accommodation approved, and it is now created and in use. I won't repeat the precise wording of the application description, but I would note the sofa barn that's proposed is a very simple wooden structure that would span 3.6 by 2.4 metres with a maximum height of 2.5 metres. This will be positioned within the planting belt to the southwest of the farmstead for use in connection with weddings and not as accommodation. The three timber camping pods would be located in a field to the south of the farmstead, and you can see those points just highlighted on the map. Set against a backdrop of existing hedging, the pods would span 5.2 metres long by 2.4 metres wide with an arched roof form and a maximum height of approximately 2.7 metres. Each pod would include a 1 metre long terrace and a parking space, accessed via a stone track taken from the field entrance. There was a number of changes and improvements to the scheme which were noted in full in the officer's report. So if we could just pop to the first photograph. Thank you. This is the entrance to be used, and you'll have seen that the condition relates specifically that all holiday accommodation will be taken via this entrance at Bog Hall Farm. And towards the end of these photographs, I have some more pictures that show you the signage kind of in better detail. The second photograph is taken from the point where the older access and the new access meet at a sort of curved point, looking eastwards towards the farm itself. And the third photograph is a photograph of the landscaping belt, and it's within this landscaping belt where the sofa barn would be located for use in connection with the weddings. The next photograph should be a similar view, so it's just showing the view from the access track to that point. The next photograph is showing where the camping pods themselves would be located, and it's against this backdrop of the existing hedgerow. The next photograph is just showing that point again, really, and you can see the actual access that's already existing to the field at that point. And the next photograph is a view within the site, sort of looking northwards and sort of eastwards as well. So you're getting kind of the wider landscape views there. At this point, you can also appreciate the kind of mature edge of the hedge, which is going to be allowed to grow up as well to sort of create that backdrop for the pods. The next photograph is another view sort of looking towards the north and east. And the next one is a view from the other part of the field looking towards where the pods would actually be located, so you're appreciating kind of the level change at that point. And the next photograph is another very similar one. Sorry, the next one we'll go to. Yeah, that's showing the back of the hedge at that point. So it's showing it is quite mature, quite thick, and will also be allowed to grow up. It even looks like it has been allowed to grow up slightly already at that point. The next photograph is a recent photograph of the original access. I believe this was taken yesterday, and in the last couple of weeks there has been some additional signage put up just to clearly emphasise that the access that is closer to those residential properties wouldn't be used as part of this application, or shouldn't be used as part of this application, and for the uses that are proposed. The next photograph is a slightly better view of the sign at Bog Hall Farm, and the next photograph just shows it a little bit more clearly. And as you might remember from, I think, the first photograph, it's double-sided as well. And slightly unrelated to this application, whenever the wedding events are held, the couple sort of put out temporary signs also in the verges that are then collected and removed, just to further emphasise, for the weddings at least, you know, what you should be using. In terms of representations, there were 5 formal letters of objection received from contributors living within 2 properties, which were summarised in the report. There were concerns over the potential continued use of the original access and other issues as well, including noise, quality of life, overdevelopment, whether this might lead to further incremental growth and non-farming activities, and the lack of facilities that was perceived to be the case for the pods themselves. Sorry, excuse me. The Town Council confirmed that they had no observations to record when they were consulted. I would just draw your attention to the fact that a letter has been supplied to you from the applicant this morning, and it was put on your desks, I believe. This was noted as not something, they didn't choose to register to speak, so I won't read it out in detail. But it is there for you to consider as part of your overall consideration of this. So as noted in the report, it's considered that subject to full consideration of all the aspects, the proposal in terms of principle is a relatively modest scheme and is considered acceptable in terms of policies SP1 and SP8. In terms of character and form and impact on the area of high landscape value, the physical developments that are proposed have been considered in relation to those sensitivities. And it's considered that the proposed sofa barn, given its position within a well-wooded landscape and built, and really the modest proportions of that building wouldn't result in any harm. The council's tree and landscape officer confirmed no objection to that element of the development and recommended no conditions in relation to the sofa barn. The 3 pods, which are located in the more easterly field, are also considered to be relatively modest in scale and form. Whilst concerns have been raised in potential to other future development, as part of this application, we can only consider what's in front of us. The units themselves will be completed with medium to dark horizontal timber boarding, which will be allowed to weather naturally. And as you can appreciate from the aerial photograph, any views will be very distant. There also is a condition to ensure that there's no lighting unless otherwise agreed in writing with the local planning authority. As noted, the proposal would incorporate an access track and access footpath. But again, that's of quite a limited scale and is not considered that that would appear isolated or impact upon the area of high landscape value. The tree and landscape officer has recommended conditioning the landscape and specifications that have been proposed by the agent. In terms of residential amenity, as indicated in the report, the occupiers of neighbouring properties, which are Moorcroft and Southview, have indicated their concerns in relation to the development and also in terms of the ongoing compliance in relation to the previous conditions associated with the earlier 2017-18 permission, mainly focusing on what they perceive to be the inconsistent use of the new access via Bog Hall Farm. As we've noted, there has been some new, very recent signage put in place, and the proposal does confirm that the new tourist accommodation would only be taken via Bog Hall Farm, which would be conditioned. The issue of compliance with the earlier planning conditions is a matter that could potentially be further explored if necessary under planning enforcement. Recent discussions have been ongoing with the applicant following concerns being raised by locals with myself. The action so far has been to undertake the installation of additional signage which you've been able to view, and it was also noted by the applicant that companies and wedding guests and holiday makers are advised of the correct access to use prior to coming to the site. And following those recent concerns raised, 2 suppliers and a specific taxi company were identified and contacted to remind them of their obligations. It's considered that this is a pragmatic way of dealing with concerns as they arise, but again, we do reserve the right to have more formal enforcement action if it's necessary. The Council's Environmental Health team have been consulted in relation to this proposal for the new holiday accommodation. They confirmed they had no objection relating to noise, but they did seek a condition to implement a noise management plan. A noise management plan was provided, and you'll have been able to review that within the officer's report. Some of the key points of that is that during visitor usage of the camping pods, there will be a regular patrol of the area carried out by the nominated noise management officer to ensure breakout noise from the area is kept to a minimum. All monitoring will be documented and kept available for inspection by the local authority. There's a pre-letting information package made available to holidaymakers, and also that's supplemented by information within the pods themselves. And also, I think I've actually got one more photograph. Could we go on to the next photograph, please? Yeah, sorry, this is some more of the new signage that's been installed within the site recently, and this is for anybody who's exiting the site. And I think the proliferation of signs really does help to emphasise it's not to go straight ahead, it is to go to the right. And I know Gary has visited the site since that signage has been put in place, and I believe he went the correct way.
Yeah, I didn't go the wrong way.
Okay, that's
No,
good.
you left
That's
in
on
no
record.
doubt. That's for certain.
I'm glad that's on record. The Council's Environmental Health Officer reviewed the noise management plan, and they confirmed in late June that they're satisfied that that will be appropriate to control any noise outbreak, and that has been conditioned as well. North Yorkshire Highways also had no objection to the proposal, and therefore it's considered that This has been carefully considered and subject to the recommended conditions. It is subject to an officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Niamh. Are there any questions? Councillor Cleary.
Is it in front of us because of the objections? Or if there had been no objections, would it have gone under delegated powers?
Yeah, that's correct.
Councillor Mrs Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick up on the lighting, because I know we say no additional external lighting, but what's already there? Anything or nothing?
There is nothing in that field at the moment in terms of lighting, so that would capture anything new that is proposed.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Can we go straight into debate? I think it's yours, Simon. You're the nearest. Yes.
Yes, it's not my ward as it happens. I have very little to say about it really, other than I know of the wedding venue, never been to it. I can't make any comment. Three additional pods and a barn with some sofas in. Yeah, great.
That's sort of a move for approval, and I'm going to second the move for approval. It seems to cover all the bases. It's a very modest, I think a relatively modest thing. It's tourism, agriculture going hand in hand, rural land use. I second Councillor Thackeray's approval.
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, I've got nothing against this, but contrary to Highway's view, I still believe that the access via Boghole Farm on a hill with poor visibility in either direction is potentially dangerous, and particularly given the intensification that's going on at the site. I said so at the previous application, and the road hasn't changed one iota since then, so I think I shall be abstaining on this one. Thank you.
If there's nobody else who wishes to speak, we'll go to the vote, if that's all right.
Thank you, Chairman. This is voting for approval. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Brackstone?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Hope's gone. Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
Abstain.
Councillor Thackeray?
For.
And Councillor Windrush has gone. So that's 6 votes for and 1 abstention. So the application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go on to item number 13, which is in Setrington Parish Council. And it's listed building consent for an internal and external alterations to existing domestic garage to form a home office and bathroom, to include the installation of timber framed glazing to the southeast elevation with double doors, installation of two number roof lights to northeast slope and 1 number roof light to southwest slope at Brook Farm, Beck Lane, Setrington. Can we have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. On this application, I think we've got 2 speakers, an objector, Mr Mitchell, and the agent, Claire Louise Booth. There aren't really any updates to the reports, Chairman. I think probably just would help if we quickly went to the presentation photographs so that members can get a feel for the building that's the subject of the application. And that's it, which is the view from... It's actually it's called Back Lane, but actually it's probably the main road now, in the sense that the front of these properties actually go onto the Beck, Settring. So this is the route from off towards the from the school southwards off towards Setrington. Is it Hall at that point? This is the building, and this is an ancillary building relating to the Brook Farm property. And if we go to the next photograph, you can see this is the sort of southwest view of the property, and that's the existing entrance to the site. So Brook Farm is actually set well back on the property, and behind you can just see the apex of the neighbouring property, which I think is Mr Mitchell's house. I think it probably was a barn conversion in the past. I'm not absolutely sure, but anyway, this is the elevation, which if members can look very quickly at page 615 is the elevation which says southeast elevation, which is the one which is sort of part glazed, part timber clad. The plans before you on the agenda are a revised plan with more boarding on that elevation, and also whilst pointing to the southwest elevation, which is the roadside elevation, you can see there's just the one Velux conservation roof light on that elevation. All the accommodations on ground floor, there's no first floor in this building, just to confirm that point for you. So if we can just quickly go to the next photo. This is standing within the site, so this is the end gable of the building where this slightly odd, slightly more modern garage door would be removed and replaced by the glazed and timber elevation that you see on the southeast elevation. And the next photo, and this is just within the site, looking back towards the roadway entrance. As you'll see from page 614, this building actually sort of almost projects into the neighbouring property actually. The red line is a sort of mishmash of what I guess is a historical subdivision of the farm and some of the previous barn buildings. But I would stress for members, and I think that might be the last photograph, I'll just, yeah, it is. If you just go back to that one. On that elevation, if you can picture then on the northeast elevation, there are two high-level conservation roof lights on towards the rear of the roof slope, heading back northwards. I would stress that this is a listed building consent application. It's not a planning application. And so what we're really dealing with here are the effects on the heritage asset, which is a non-designated, sorry, it's not designated, it's a Kirtleys listed building within the conservation area, but it's what we're dealing with here are the assessment of the physical implications for the fabric, the historic fabric of the building, rather than any amenity impacts that you would deal with if you were dealing with a planning application. And I think some of the issues that have been raised by the neighbouring objector are straying beyond the scope of listed building consent issues relating to amenity issues and the like, which are not within our gift to consider really in this listed building consent application. As a matter of fact, I think it is fair to say, notwithstanding that the conservation roof lights that we're showing on these elevations are actually at quite a high level. You know, this is all on ground floor, so they're not functioning as a window. You would not be able to go to these windows and look out of them as you would out of a window on the same floor. So that's really all I wanted to say, really, is just to draw out the fact that this is a listed building consent application. We're dealing with the heritage asset, the implications for that. As you'll have seen from the report, what we're looking at on page 615 is the amended plan, which is a reduced number of openings and a different treatment to the end elevation. This is an application that your building conservation officer is happy to recommend approval to. So I won't labour the point, Chairman. We've got two speakers who you may wish to hear from.
Right, so the first speaker is Mr. Alan Mitchell. Are you there, Mr. Mitchell?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you speak, please? And you have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Councillors and council officers, this application is supposed to relate to the conversion of an existing domestic garage to form a home office and bathroom. We respectfully question that fundamental statement. We've lived in the neighbouring Kirtleys listed barn for some 15 years, having converted it ourselves to a family home in that period. During that time, we've never seen this building used as a garage. Our previous neighbour, who died about 18 months ago, was an old tenant farmer. He used it as his workshop to mend farm equipment, store tools, and house his diesel tank. He always parked his vehicles in the yard. The site was then purchased by the applicant, and the farmhouse continued in its existing residential use. However, there's been no planning application seeking to change the agricultural use of this building, which had never been for a domestic garage. We've been advised that the lawful use of this building is still agricultural, and that a grant of planning permission is required before it can be considered to be used for a purpose other than agricultural storage. We feel that the current proposal suggests a self-contained flat with no connection to the main house. There is a bathroom, a previous drawing showed a kitchenette, there are numerous roof windows, and the planning consultant has confirmed that it would be used for occasional sleeping. This looks suspiciously like an Airbnb and as such should require a planning application for the change of use. If this were done, then this would allow the consideration of some of the other concerns that we have with this application. For example, one of the roof windows looks directly into our daughter's bedroom. We've suggested alternative room layouts to reduce the number of roof lights, but these have been ignored. Instead, the planning consultant has disagreed with our observation. We invite a council officer or councillor to visit our house and view this for themselves. The elephant in the room, though, is our 2,000 litre oil tank sits directly beside this building. We feel that if this application, with a potential provision for sleeping accommodation, is granted, then this would present an unacceptable fire hazard. In Ryedale, with the sad experience of deaths due to fires in converted buildings, 2 jockeys were killed a number of years ago, and more recently a Polish builder died in a fire in a converted agricultural building at Martin. We don't think the fire issue should be ignored, assuming it will be addressed further down the line by building control. This is far from ideal or reassuring. By granting this application today, councillors are accepting of the fire risks identified. We recognise that some of the matters that we raise cannot be considered via an application for listed building consent.
You have 30 seconds.
But ask that this application is deferred to allow a planning application to be submitted. We've instructed planning consultants to act on our behalf in relation to the issue of the current lawful use of this building. It does not seem safe for the council to grant listed building consent with the implication that planning permission is not required before this matter is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have the second speaker, who's the agent, Claire Louise Booth. Are you there, Claire Louise?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This application is for listed building consent, and applications for listed building consent consider only the alterations to the building, as you've heard. A separate change of use application is not required for ancillary accommodation. That would be in a bedroom, an office, a gym or a garage, regardless of what domestic activity takes place. This is not a change of use. This is something which is ancillary to the domestic use of the house. We can confirm that there is no intention for this building to become a separate dwelling or a holiday let, as suggested, and indeed a separate application would be required for that kind of use. The alterations to the exterior of the building include 1 roof light to the roadside, 2 roof lights to the north side, alterations to the east gable facing into the yard, which is already a much altered elevation, a cast iron vent to the west gable serving an extractor fan, which is positioned in the apex of the gable, which is quite high up, and the blocking of the north door with stone to remove access into the neighbour's property to reduce the need for maintenance from their side. These are the only external changes proposed. Amenity issues, as you've heard, are not a matter for this application. Only the impact of the works on the historic and architectural significance of the Kirkledge listed building are relevant. And any matters relating to the neighbour's oil tank are considered to be a civil matter between the 2 parties and not relevant to the determination of this application. Thank you.
The officers want to come back on some of the statements that have been made.
Yes, I think, well, the agent has sort of taken one of the points that I was going to come back on, was that if there is a use of the building that constitutes a material change of use, then that would require a planning application. So there's mention of a self-contained holiday unit or an Airbnb or whatever. That would need planning permission. That clearly is not what we're dealing with here. But I really do need to come back on some of the comments that were made about fire safety there, and making almost analogous comments with the accommodation at Martin, and I was personally at the inquest on that one, Chairman, so I'm very well equipped to answer the questions on that. Not that I was at the inquest for the ones for the unfortunate incident with the jockeys near to the swimming pool in Norton, but both of those circumstances were, in essence, buildings which had a first floor which did not have a proper means of fire escape, or had a blocked fire escape from which nobody could get out. And so it's not a fire safety isn't really a planning issue anyway. It's a building regs and a fire safety issue, but it's not a planning issue. But in any event, it's not comparable to this situation at all. So I would ask you to strike that from your minds in terms of considering the planning issues with this application. In terms of this building, whether it's described as a garage or a workshop or whatever, historically this went with the farm as far as we can tell in terms of our investigations. It's an ancillary building to the farm, and what's being proposed here is an ancillary use to the farmhouse, and that does not need planning permission. So what we're dealing with here, Chairman, is a listed building consent application, and as we've heard, the alterations through amendment and negotiation are now of a relatively minor nature, and so that's why we're recommending approval, Chairman.
Are there any questions? Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. Given that it's listed building and it's not got a first floor, and I hear what's being said about no first floor, is there any reason why we couldn't suggest that the glazing on these roof lights isn't obscured?
If you felt that there was a planning reason for that, you could. I mean, clearly we have on occasions had fixed, roof light windows, but where there's been a sort of judgment made on whether or not the window would function as a window rather than a roof light, where you're sort of looking down or out, and it is a judgment call based on what you're looking at before you. I mean, clearly a usual sort of consideration there is the ceiling to floor height issue relating to the window. So where you're in a situation where there's a floor and you're looking out because it's at this sort of height, well, if it was my height, this sort of height level, for you it'd probably be a little higher. But, you're making a judgment call whether or not there's a need for obscuration or fixing or hinging in any particular direction. I don't think but you're dealing with it in the context of a residential amenity. And here all we're dealing with is the heritage requirement. So if we were dealing with a planning application, you could potentially take into account the amenity issues, but this is a listed building consent application.
Are there any more questions? And if there are no more questions, then can we go into debate? And I think it's yours, Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report and the comments following on from the speaker by Mr. Housden cover pretty much what I was going to say on behalf of the neighbour. It seems to be a theme running through this evening's meeting that we have to discuss and decide on what's in front of us, not what we might think is in question or what people have raised as the question. It would, if things were different and it was an application, then we'd have to look at the amenity, we'd have to look at some of the objections that the neighbour, Mr. Mitchell, has raised. That, unfortunately, is not within our gift. It is very clear what what is in front of us. It's a listed building consent, and the overwhelming recommendation is for us to pass it. That said, I am grateful for my friend and colleague, Councillor Goodrick, for raising the issue of, or the question, the subject of the roof light. I don't think if we were to step on the line and say it would not, if we were to insist on opaque or whatever, obscure glazing, thank you, Simon, obscure glazing, it would not defeat the object of the roof light. And I don't believe, I've no idea, I don't know the applicant and I don't know how they think, I would not think it unreasonable for the applicant to accept that condition, thus assuaging one of the objections to the neighbour. I would therefore move approval with the addition of the condition of obscure glazing to the roof lights. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I said the roof lights.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Goodrick. Does anybody else wish to speak? Yeah, Councillor Thackeray.
I'd be happy to do that so that the one facing the other way is clear.
Councillor Mason.
I have a question. Firstly, I get the impression we can't do that. We have to do what's in front of us. And secondly, perhaps we should defer this and ask the applicant if they're prepared to do it.
Chairman, I think we can't, because we're dealing with obscuration based on residential amenity. It's nothing to do with heritage.
Yep.
So you're overstepping the mark here. What you've got to deal with is what's before you. It's already an amended scheme. This is what we've got. So they ain't going to amend it again. And so it comes down to what's reasonable. You can only deal with the heritage issues here. And the rationale, albeit I can understand why Councillor Cleary said what he said, is on the basis of a residential amenity rather than a historic interest.
Can I suggest that rather than imposing a condition, the officers be instructed to just ask the applicant if he would like to make those windows in obscure glass. I mean, he can only if he wishes to say no, he can say no.
Chairman, you're putting me in a position where I'm asking for something I can't ask for.
No.
The issue here is you've got unglazed windows, roof lights, approve or refuse. That's what you've got. It's a listed building consent application, not a planning application.
Chair, I think, sorry, no, Gary, I think you misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we ask him to amend his application. All I'm saying is we grant the application, but in granting the application, a polite letter is sent to him saying, could you please put obscured glass in there?
Chairman, the agent's on the call, and he's listing very clearly what members' view is. I'm sure the agent will be perfectly capable of passing on that message in the interest of neighbourliness. But in terms of your listed building consent application, you've got a fairly limited remit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In view of the advice of our professional and well-experienced officer, I withdraw that condition and trust. I'm a very trusting and hopeful person that the agent relays our wishes and our hopes for the neighbourliness. I don't withdraw the move approval as per the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Potter?
Yeah, it's only a brief one. The paper that was put on our table from Mr. Mitchell has a very useful photograph on the second page. And as far as I can see, if you put those Velux windows in, you've either got to stand on a high step ladder or put a mezzanine floor in, which would be not quite part of the permission, to actually have any overlook into the window. So I can't see there be any point whatsoever in putting obscure glazing in there. Thank you.
If there are no other first people wishing to speak, we'll go to the vote.
Chairman, I think, I'm not sure, Councillor Cleary's proposed it as recommended.
I will second it, Chair.
Right, okay.
I will second it from the chair, is what I meant to say.
Thank you. Right, so quickly, this is for approval as recommended. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Brackstone?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
Abstain.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter?
For.
Councillor Thackeray? For. So that's 6 votes for and 1 abstention. Thank you. It is approved.
We now go on to our last item, which is item 14, which is the Bay Horse Inn at Main Street, Terrington, which is on page 634. Could we have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Just draw members' attention to a plan that was omitted from the main agenda papers, which is the very last page of the late pages. This was the drawing of the scheme that was approved in 2017 for a manager's accommodation on exactly the same location. The main change being is that what's being proposed now is effectively got a second bedroom, so the unit is a metre wider. In all other respects, it occupies the same position on the plot, which is essentially accessed via South Back Lane West. So that the main pub's on the main village street. You can't get to the back without going through the pub, but you come through, there's a rear entrance. Those of you who know Terrington will probably know the very checkered history of the pub there. It's been shut for many years. It's now in the process of being renovated. Quite a lot of work going on. There wasn't any work going on today when I went there earlier this morning, but originally there used to be a very dilapidated outbuilding in the location of where this proposed manager's dwelling would be located. That's now been demolished and awaiting essentially the permission that's being asked for tonight. The rationale for this, that we had a gentleman come along 3 years ago who was showing his new business model, which was essentially reopening the pub, but with accommodation for letting above the pub for holiday accommodation, hence the need for the manager's house at the rear. So if you can quickly just go to the photos, if you can. I don't think there are many. So this is the entrance. So this comes past the bungalow that's on the road frontage. So this is the entrance into what was the old pub car park. So it's a very strange sort of arrangement, but that's how it historically has been. And if you carry on to the next photograph, as you can see on the elevation here, as you're going up South Back Lane West, the land's rising. So the neighbouring property, which is right next to the back of the pub garden, is actually on a higher level. The ground floor levels must be at least 4 feet higher, if not higher. And this area here is essentially where the dwelling would sit. This you can see in the foreground, the building that was previously there has been demolished, and the new manager's dwelling would sit in this part of the site. So if you can go to the next photo. So this is just panning round, and I think there might be one more photo. Yeah, so this is, well, you can see they're already started clearing the site and working on the back of the pub. So it's all very quaint on the front, but the back of the pub's a typical pub with, rather lacklustre additions to it. Yeah, good to see the pub hopefully reopening in the not too distant future. But this amended scheme, which I say is very similar to what was previously approved, has given rise to some objections again, as it did previously. So hence that's why it's before you for consideration tonight. We recommend approval again to this scheme.
There are no speakers. Are there any questions?
I'm indebted to Councillor Potter, who'd spotted it's a 2-bedroom manager's dwelling, not a 1-bedroom manager's dwelling.
Councillor Goodrick.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. The drawing that we've got on page 58 actually only shows 1 bedroom, so I'm assuming it's a mezzanine which goes up into the roof space, which is why there's the need for 2 Velux windows in the roof.
Sorry, on page 58 on the late pages, that was the scheme we approved in 2017.
Right, okay.
The scheme that's been applied for now is on page 642.
All right, let me go
It's about a metre wider, and it's got a different configuration, but it sits in the same location on the plot.
So I'll come back to what I was going to drive at before, the Velux windows in the roof. Are they at the back of that wall? Would they overlook anybody?
No, they're at a lower level. The whole site's at a lower level.
So they won't look.
No,
they won't be overlooked. No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
No. I mean, it's about. I mean, the one Velux is to a bathroom, so one might expect that to be obscured at least. And the other one's to an internal corridor leading from the living room. But I mean, that's for their own benefit. But if we can just go back to the second photograph or the third photograph, just to pick up your neighbour amenity point. As you can see, this is set lower down behind the property, so it's behind the fence. I mean, that wall is probably as tall as I am before you get to the fence. Right. So these VLUX are not at any high level at all. Not from that elevation, no. No, I don't think so. No. Not in that elevation. The bungalow, as you can see from the location plan, is located quite close into this corner, and the VLUX, I would suggest, probably don't even extend beyond the lean-to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? As there are no other questions, I throw the matter over to debate. I'm not quite sure which member. Councillor Goodrick, then.
Shall I take this since it's part of my division? The history of this pub is somewhat checkered, and yet we have another iteration of what's going to come forward with it. I, like the rest of the village of Terrington, would desperately like to see this pub open and start trading again. So I will move approval of the officer's recommendation for this, and let's get on and get the pub back opened, because believe it or not, it was my first date with my husband at that pub.
Councillor Mason.
I'll second that, and I'll join Caroline there for a pint one day, hopefully.
Anybody else wish to speak? Can we have the vote, please, Gary?
This is a vote for approval as recommended, just with the minor change to condition 3, sorry. Councillor Andrews?
For.
Councillor Brackstone?
For.
Councillor Cleary?
For.
Councillor Goodrick?
For.
Councillor Mason?
For.
Councillor Potter? For. Councillor Thackeray? So that's 7 votes to 0, unanimously approved, Chairman.
Thank you. There's no other business I'm aware of, and there's the list of applications to be determined under, which have been determined under delegated. Yeah. Yes, go on.
I'm just wondering. Yeah.
But also then to use to maybe lobby through to try and get some change in policy.
Yeah, I think there's a
pretty restrictive.
Yeah, I think there's a piece of work to do with Jill, I think, in terms of how this links in with the local plan working party work anyway. I mean, some of that is probably going to get discussed at council in the coming week or so, I would imagine, and around the plan review and the scope of the plan and the timetable, which of course there are worries about. But I'll mention it to Jill and see how she thinks we can bring that forward. Yeah. I think Jill's aiming to hopefully have a local plan working party meeting towards the end of the month. So it may be that it's something features in that. I mean, clearly the local plan working party is comprised of quite a number of members who are in this room as well. So that maybe that's the arena, rather than having bespoke things to come straight to this meeting, to have that talking shop first and see where that takes us.
Councillor Goodrick.
Just to say that, I think it should be at the local plan working party, but because it's a policy decision, it would be P&R, it's not this committee.
If there's no any other business, then there's the list of applications determined under delegated powers. Does anybody have any questions or points to make in regard to those? Officers? Yeah. Right. In that case, as there are no questions,
The appeal decision was actually a hedgerow removal notice, which was a very interesting one. In fact, I think Councillor Potter may have spotted what could be an error in the inspector's decision, where there's a reference to the south of Braygate Street, Swinton. So we still haven't got to the bottom of that one yet, Councillor Potter, but well spotted. Possibly. So we're still working on that one.
right, well, I will now declare the meeting closed.